My name is Tucker Desko, and I had my term project report on the country of France, and I'm just going to kind of outline the physical geography and climate of the region. Um, so, in terms of the physical geography of France, it's obviously a southwestern coastal European country, and then the country of France itself geographically shares borders with Spain, Italy, Monaco, Switzerland, Germany, Luxembourg, Andorra, and Belgium. And it would be touching the United Kingdom if it wasn't separated by the English Channel. In terms of its land area and mass, it has roughly 4,800 kilometers of coastline, which is obviously significant when it comes to its weather patterns and climate and coastal interference. In terms of its annual climate, it's usually cool winters and mild summers inland, and mild winters and hot summers as you go towards the coast. And then in terms of the topography, it's mostly just kind of rolling hills and flat plains. And then as you go more southeast, it gets more mountainous. Um, in terms of the physical geography and the economy of the area, a lot of the natural resources include coal, iron ore, zinc, uranium, antimony, arsenic, timber, gold, petroleum, and clay. So these are obviously pretty big economic influences and factors when it comes to exporting and industrializing and making materials and manufacturing and things like that. And also, another big portion of the economy is agriculture, too. Roughly 50% of the land use is designated to agriculture, things like forestry and farming and fishing and just that types of land use. And some of the natural environmental hazards in the southwestern region of Europe relate to flooding, obviously, near the coast, and then avalanches and drought, forest fires, hurricanes near the coast, and volcanic activity. Obviously, these varies. These vary as you go from coast inland, but they're all still pretty significant impacts. In terms of anthropogenic interference or human-related interference, in terms of environmental degradation, that can relate to acid rain. Acid rain essentially stemming from pollution from industrial practices. And then obviously you have an urban and agricultural factor as well when it comes to those types of pollution, whether it be airborne pollutants or waterborne. And then, like I said earlier, the economic activity is mostly agriculture and those types of land use practices, as well as natural gas and fossil fuels, and then also a decent player in the renewable energy service as well. So, continuing off the economic factors of France, the GDP is roughly $2.7 trillion, and I think one of the interesting things about France and Austria at the border, there is a Large Hadron Collider, which is this giant experimental particle physics apparatus, which essentially is super innovative in the new field of particle physics and finding ways to create new energy sources and whatnot. So that's a pretty important factor in their economy and their innovation, I think. And then in terms of France's demographics, it's actually really hard to get an accurate estimate of demographics because a law in 1872 actually prevented the French from calculating and conducting censuses due to religious and racial beliefs. So that's kind of an interesting way to uh, figure out that they're not really necessarily up to date on all their census information. But from what I got recently, the population is a pretty linear thing, and that was roughly 65 million. Most recently, I checked. Roughly 81% of this population is in urban areas, and then in terms of the actual the demographic of these people, it's mostly white or European, and then you have some from North Africa and some Black and some Asian. And a lot of the main immigrants were usually Central Asians, Nordic Islanders, and Middle Easterners. Contemporarily, the climate is variable. It has the oceanic climate of Western France, the continental climate of Central and Eastern France, and Mediterranean climate of Southeastern France, and then the mountain climate of areas above 600 to 800 meters of elevation. It's moderate rainfall, but it still has fertile land and good agricultural resources. And then obviously these weather patterns are influenced by barometric pressure and changes in prevailing winds. And most of these prevailing winds are La Bise, Le Mistral, Le Tramontane, and Le Vente des Automne. These are most of the prevailing winds that influence most of the climate factors and variations within France. And so these are kind of some of the future projected claims that might happen within France and southwestern Europe over the next 50 to 60 years or so. But that's a general overview of kind of France and what happens in that part of the European region, and what's anticipated to happen over the next few years. Thank you.